Guys, it's Miss Simpson and it's time for science today. We are going to start off by reviewing what we learned yesterday. Herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and scavengers. So let's talk about herbivores. Herbivores only eat what? Plants. They only eat plants. They do not eat any kind of animals or meat or anything. They only eat plants. What about a carnivore? You're right, a carnivore only eats meat. They only eat meat. They don't eat any kind of plants ever. What about an omnivore? An omnivore eats both plants and animals. We are omnivores because we eat both plants and animals, unless you are vegetarian, vegan. Those people that have those kind of diets, they only eat plants most of the time. And a scavenger, or like vultures and things like that, and they eat like dead animals or things like kind of like roadkill. Pretty gross. So we're going to go through and we're going to drag and drop each of these into the correct category. So what do you think a giraffe is? Herbivore, carnivore, omnivore, or scavenger? Well, giraffe is an herbivore. It only eats plants. What about an owl? An owl is a carnivore. It only eats animals. What about an earthworm? An earthworm is actually a scavenger. It eats that underneath the ground. It eats all of the nasty things. It's actually a decomposer, so it decomposes all of that. What about this vulture? Have you ever seen a vulture on the side of the road? What is it eating? You are so right. It is eating dead things. Nasty, huh? What about a deer? What do you know about deer? Yeah, a deer is an herbivore. It only eats plants. What about a bird? What do you think? I've only I would say a bird's an omnivore because it does eat worms sometimes and bugs, and it also eats plants. So I'm going to say omnivore. What about a bunny? I've only ever seen a bunny eat like bunny food and grass. What about a hyena? We talked about hyenas. A hyena is technically considered a scavenger. It could also be a carnivore. It can eat some meat. What about a fish? I'm going to say it's an omnivore because sometimes fish eat other fish, which is a carnivore. Sometimes they eat plants and animals underneath the ocean. So I would say it's both. What about a lion? We know a lion's a carnivore. It only eats other animals. There we go. What about a killer whale? A killer whale is a carnivore. It only eats other fish. What about a snake? I would say a snake. This is a hard one, but I'm going to say it's a carnivore because I've only seen it eat like rats and mice and stuff. A penguin is also a carnivore. It only eats other not other penguins. Goodness gracious, other fish. And this little deer is an herbivore. So remember, herbivore eats only plants. A carnivore eats only meat. An omnivore eats both, and a scavenger eats like dead things and decomposing materials. So I want to talk to you today about food chains. And we talked a little bit about food chains yesterday, but we are going to talk more about them today. So food chains. Do you know what starts off a food chain? Well, remember, all of us, we all get our energy from, it starts off with the sun. So every food chain starts off with the sun. Then what do we go to? After we have the sun, we go to, I hope you said plants, and I am horrible at drawing, so I'm just going to draw a cute little flower. So once we eat, the plants, make their own food. They don't eat other plants, and they don't require nutrients from anything else besides the sun. So the sun gives energy to the plant. What happens after our plant? Plants are called, do you remember from yesterday? Plants are called producers because they produce their own food. What happens after our producer? Something has to eat that producer, right? So I, again, am a horrible drawer, but I'm going to draw a little bunny. So I'm going to say this bunny was hopping along and it ate this flower. So what is the bunny called? We talked about the bunny. The bunny is an herbivore, but what else is it? In the food chain, what is the bunny? It is a primary consumer. So number one, it's an herbivore, and number two, it's our primary consumer. So then what would eat a bunny? Let's say now again, horrible at drawing, but I'm doing my very best. We're going to say a nice big, again, horrible at drawing, but a nice big hawk ate our, look at my hawk. It doesn't seem very mean looking, but that's okay. A nice big hawk ate our bunny. What is this hawk? Well, this hawk is a carnivore because it only eats meat, but it is also our secondary consumer. And finally, when sadly that hawk dies and passes away, it is going to go into the dirt or on the side of the road, depending on what happens to it, but it's going to die and it is going to be eaten, and I'm going to say, by an earthworm. Because I love this pink marker. That's why we're doing an earthworm. This is a big old earthworm in comparison to my hawk, but that's okay. And the earthworm is considered a decomposer. So energy travels through animals in something called food chains. So it goes from the sun and where we get all of our energy into our producers, and those are our plants. And then an herbivore or an omnivore eats those plants, and those become our primary consumers because they consume the plants. Then our secondary consumer is normally a carnivore or an omnivore, and it eats those primary consumers, and that's our secondary consumer. And then when our secondary consumer dies, it is decomposed by earthworms, mushrooms, fungi, all kinds of things. Sometimes vultures will eat it because they are also decomposers and scavengers. But all our energy flows through a process, and it is a food chain because it happens in an order. So today, what I want you to do is I want you to draw your own food chain, and I want you to label it just like I have. So you cannot use anything that I have used. So besides the sun, I suggest getting out a piece of paper and first drawing your sun, and then looking at my food chain and seeing, ooh, okay, I'm going to draw grass. What eats grass? Then what would eat that animal? Then what would eat that animal? I want you to draw it just like I have. I want you to label it producers, herbivore, producers, primary consumer, secondary consumer, decomposer. And then I want you to tell me those two animals in the middle. Is it a carnivore, an omnivore, or an herbivore? And I want you to label those within your food chain. So one more time, you're going to draw a food chain. There has to be the sun, a producer, a primary consumer, a secondary consumer, and a decomposer. And then I want you to tell me of these two ones in the middle, is it a primary, or is it an herbivore, an omnivore, or a carnivore? All right, guys, so you have so much fun drawing your food chain. I would really like, if you have colors, please draw it in color just like I have. So your middle, there should be one label for each except for the middle, and there should be two because I want to know, is it an herbivore, an omnivore, or a carnivore? All right, guys, y'all have fun drawing your food chain. When you get done, take a picture of your food chain and turn it in. I love you so much. Have a great day.